Buddy, this is going to be Chapter 13, Part 1, A House Divided, getting up to the Civil War. So, we're actually going to start in 1840s with the Mexican War in Texas and in the West. And we're going to start with a quote from that time period from Davy Crockett, a former Tennessee congressman and defender of the Alamo and kind of folk hero of the Americas, who said, after he lost his reelection to the House seat in Tennessee, he said, "You may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." So, going into the 1840s, America was westward thinking. We had already gotten a lot. We had gotten all the way to the Mississippi River and beyond with the Louisiana Purchase. Now we were expanding our horizons towards the Pacific Ocean. And in the following years, we would get Oregon, we'd get Texas, we'd get California, we would get what today would be the contiguous United States. However, this would also exacerbate the issue of slavery, American slavery, and this would be a constant thorn in the side of American politicians going all the way up to the Civil War in 1861, until eventually we reached the point where compromise could no longer be a possibility. So let's look first at the expansion of Manifest Destiny. As we continued to move west, slavery became a major talking point in the United States. It could no longer be ignored. By 1840, most land east of the Mississippi River had been cleared, and it had been declared either slave or free, looking back to like the Missouri Compromise. Now, after the economic depression of 1837, more and more Americans were deciding to try their luck out in the West, hoping to seek their fortune. Some went west on the Oregon Trail to the Willamette Valley in the Oregon Territory. Some headed to Santa Fe. Mormons were heading to Utah. By 1860, though, almost 300,000 Americans had made the journey west. Here is the famous Oregon Trail, and here, of course, is how most people my age learned about the Oregon Trail on this little 8-bit green video game on the computers where you would die of dysentery quite often. Now, this movement was in spite of the fact that America didn't quite own a lot of this land yet. Some of it was in dispute, and some of it was very much not ours. Oregon was a compromise. It was co-owned between England and the United States. And also, people were starting to head west into Mexican territory. Mexico had just gained its independence from Spain in 1821. However, in spite of all this, this belief in manifest destiny, the belief that this land would be ours one day, was very high among many Americans heading west. Even though it wasn't yet ours, we assumed that one day soon it would be, and also we assumed that we deserved to have it because we were sort of the chosen people heading west. So here is that Oregon Territory, and as you can see, the 49th parallel is where we divide it today, up by Washington. However, at that time, the United States and England co-owned it all the way up to the 5440 parallel, where it says extreme U.S. claim. We'll get back to that. So let's look at Mexico and how America started to deal with Mexico. After Mexico achieved independence in 1821, it was a very large and relatively populous country, almost equal to the size and population of the United States, even though I said untied states there. We're going to ignore that, hopefully. However, not many people lived in the northern region of the New Mexico Territory, the California Territory, or the Texas Territory. It was mainly Native Americans with some ranchers interspersed in there. However, we started to see the growth of trails that headed west from places like Independence, Missouri, into Santa Fe, into California, into Texas, into Salt Lake City, Utah. And so, very soon, very quickly, America became Mexico's primary trading partner. And that would open the door to immigration into Mexico as well. And so, here are the movements of, or I'm sorry, not movements, but here's what Mexico looked like at that time. This is an independent Mexico in 1821. And here's the Santa Fe Trail that led Americans from Missouri into the New Mexico territory of that time. Now, in California, a lot of this land was actually owned by Catholic missions. Think of, all the places that have Catholic missionary names like Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Bernardino, San Jose, on and on and on. However, the Mexican government dissolved these missions with the hope of attracting more settlers to the areas. And many of these new settlers, especially the cattle ranchers known as Californios, distinguished themselves as sort of people with reason, people capable of reason, which they compared to the local native tribes who they said did not have reason, which they used as sort of an excuse to take that land for themselves. By 1840, American ships were making the trek all the way down and around South America. Remember, we did not have the Panama Canal until the early 1900s. So American ships were going down and around the tip of South America to trade with these Californian western ports out there. And some Americans were talking about taking these lands for our own, what is called annexation. One of the places I was talking about it was Texas. Texas mainly was comprised of the time of about 2,000 Tejanos, who are Mexican ranchers of Spanish origins, and a whole lot more Native Americans. However, in 1820, the Spanish government and then the Mexican government offered American citizens the opportunity to immigrate to Texas. So we were not just being invited to go there and set roots. They basically were saying, you come in and you become Mexican citizens. You are becoming part of our country. The Mexican government continued this after their revolution in 1821. By 1830, over 7,000 Americans had moved to Texas, outnumbering the original Tejanos who lived in the area. One of the most primary leaders of the Texans coming in was a man named Stephen Austin and his family, including his father, Moses Austin. Stephen Austin and other Americans, along with other prominent Tejano families, soon began calling for increased independence and autonomy and self-rule from Mexico. So here's Stephen Austin, who once said, nature seemed to have intended Texas for vineyard to supply America with wines. Basically, this was a new fertile valley for Americans. However, the big issue again, which we're going to see over and over again in this chapter, is that slavery kept rearing its head over and over. Mexico had abolished slavery after the Revolution of 1821. However, regional leaders in Texas had allowed Americans to immigrate with their enslaved people, and so we start to see the rise of slavery in this Mexican territory. In 1835, the ruler of Mexico, General Antonio López de Santa Anna, sent an army to take control of Texas and to sort of force it to obey Mexican rules. In response, the Texans, the Tejanos, and the Texan Americans declared their independence from Mexico. So here is Antonio López de Santa Anna, known as the Napoleon of the West. This Texas revolt was not an easy fight. In fact, they suffered many heavy casualties along the way. They also got a lot of severe pushback from the Mexican government, who felt that basically they were stealing Mexican land. In March of 1836, Santa Anna and his army surrounded, and after a two-week siege, they stormed a fort made out of an old mission called the Alamo, killing all of the Texan defenders inside, over 180 of them, including former Congressman Davy Crockett, William Travis, who was the leader of the Texans inside, and also Jim Bowie, creator of the Bowie knife. This was sort of they were there to sort of slow down the Mexican army, and they did their job, which allowed Texas to sort of assemble its own army. And when they went into battle, they were crying, "Remember the Alamo." This sort of became the rallying cry of the Texan army, led by Sam Houston, the former governor of Tennessee. Sam Houston and the Texan army defeated Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto, and they forced him to allow Texas to break away from Mexico. So this is what the outside of the Alamo looks like. This is the fall of the Alamo as painted in the early 1900s, I believe. Davy Crockett is the one with his rifle over his head. There's a few very good movies made of the Alamo. The 1961 with John Wayne. I'm also a big fan of the early 2000 ones. I think that one's very good and underestimated as well. Here, by the way, is Sam Houston, 1793 to 1863, part of a Virginia family who moved to Tennessee, became governor of Tennessee, and eventually moved to Texas. He was a congressman, governor of Tennessee, president of the Independent Republic of Texas, a senator from Texas, and lastly, a governor of Texas, where he was forcibly removed from his job after Texas joined the Confederacy. He said it was a bad idea. He died believing it was a bad idea. So in 1837, this new Republic of Texas, an independent republic now, called for to be allowed to join the United States. However, the fear of upsetting that balance, that old Missouri Compromise fear, led to Texas not being allowed to join the United States. It remained an independent republic from 1836 all the way up through 1845. Meanwhile, more and more Americans, primarily Americans from the American South, were heading in to Texas to create plantations with enslaved people working them. By 1845, Texas had a population of over 150,000, so it was a very populous nation. So here's Texas down in the bottom there, which was independent from 1836 to 1845. You also see the trails heading from Independence, Missouri, and Nauvoo, Illinois, which was the Mormon stronghold, to Salt Lake City and up to Portland. Now, this idea of should Texas become a part of the United States became the big question of the election of 1844. And the annexation of Texas became the big election issue, partially because John Tyler made it an election issue. He needed something for people to rally behind so that he would get elected in 1844. He didn't, but he was trying to. He said that he was hoping that this annexation of Texas would rally support behind him for the election. The other candidates, like Martin Van Buren, who was running for another 4 years as president, he had taken the last 4 years off, and also Henry Clay, again, who's running for president, both warned that annexing Texas was really dangerous and could reignite the whole issue of slavery and possibly even lead to civil war. However, in the end, both John Tyler and Martin Van Buren were abandoned by the Democrats in favor of an unexpected candidate, what we call a dark horse candidate, a guy named James K. Polk. So in 1844, it's going to be Polk versus Henry Clay of the Whigs. And Polk was a Democrat. He was a relatively unknown former governor of Tennessee. The biggest credentials he had was that he was a friend of Andrew Jackson's. They called him Little Hickory as compared to Andrew Jackson's Old Hickory. And he was a firm believer that America should take over Texas. He also called for America to be given all of the Oregon Territory, all the way up to the 54th parallel, and said that we would be willing to go to war with England if we didn't get it, which the slogan for this was 54-40 or fight. In the end, James K. Polk beat Henry Clay by a very small margin, but a few days before his inauguration, Congress declared Texas part of the United States. So here's our 11th president, James K. Polk, 1845 to 49. I think he said he only really wanted to serve one term. He was born in North Carolina but moved to Tennessee, where he was a congressman and governor of Tennessee. He's also the first president to be photographed while in office, which we see right there. Now, Polk went into the presidency with a few very firm goals that he wanted to complete by the time he left. He wanted to get a lower tariff, he wanted to settle the question of Oregon, and he wanted to bring California into the United States. And the tariff he got quickly. Oregon he got quickly with a compromise. We ended up not getting it all the way up to the 54th parallel, but we did get the Willamette Valley, and we also got Puget Sound up in modern-day Washington state. So we got a lot of good stuff out of that compromise. So here's what we got. Everything in yellow is what we got from this compromise. Meanwhile, England got everything above that line of 1846 there. So it was 49th parallel and not fight instead of 54-40 and fight. California proved a little more difficult to get. James K. Polk sent emissaries to Mexico offering to buy California. However, they rejected our offer. And so instead of sending diplomats, James K. Polk sent troops led by a general named Zachary Taylor, soon to become President Zachary Taylor, into an area that both Mexico and America claimed was theirs. And he basically had his people on the border between America and Mexico, sort of, sticking their foot over the line and saying, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, until finally they were attacked. And James K. Polk got Congress to declare war on Mexico, saying that they had shed blood on American soil. So this is the disputed area between Mexico and the United States. It is now, of course, all area that is owned by the United States. Now, many Americans supported this new Mexican War, sometimes called the Mexican-American War, but however, not everybody was fully on board with this new war. Some Americans, especially Northern Americans, said that the war was unjust. Um, Ulysses S. Grant, who was a young soldier who went to go fight in the Mexican War, basically said that there was an unjust war. Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Walden and was a transcendentalist, wrote an entire essay on civil disobedience about the fact that he didn't feel the need to pay taxes because his taxes were going towards a war that he felt was unjust. And he said an unjust law was no law at all. This argument was later picked up by people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King as well. There was also several congressmen, including a young Whig named Abraham Lincoln, who said that the war was unjustly created and didn't believe in it and didn't vote for it. Lincoln demanded to see the spot on which American blood was shed. However, mostly what this did was it got him the nickname Spotty Lincoln, and he lost his bid for re-election. Lincoln, before he was president, was only a one-term congressman from Illinois. So here is young Congressman Abraham Lincoln without the beard yet. However, America very quickly moved to conquer Mexican territory. We got California. California declared its independence from Mexico. There was a short-lived republic called the Bear Flag Republic that lasted for about a month before America came in and said, it's ours now. There was also a bunch of troops who marched into the Santa Fe territory with almost no resistance. Most of the fighting went on in sort of central Mexico. This is where Zachary Taylor defeated Santa Anna at the Battle of Buena Vista. And however, Mexico was still not coming to the table. And so General Winfield Scott, an American, marched into Mexico City to force a negotiation with the Americans. So this is a map of the Mexican War. You can see places where Winfield Scott went in, General John C. Fremont, who would be important to St. Louis during the Civil War, and so on and so on. Zachary Taylor down there in Texas, moving into Mexico. Finally, in 1848, February of 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican War. America was given Texas, New Mexico, and California. The Mexicans got $15 million from the U.S. government. This, along with what's called the Gadsden Purchase, the Gadsden Purchase is when America bought a chunk of what is modern-day Arizona in order to make a railroad, made the country that we see today. The only things we had left to add on were Hawaii and Alaska and our colonies. This Mexican War and the Mexican Cession, which is the cession is us getting land from Mexico, is not well remembered in America, except probably in Texas. Texas is very proud of their independence from Mexico, and it's taught in all the schools there. However, Mexico really remembers this, and not fondly, as the time that America basically forced them to give up their land. So this is still a point of contention. So you notice down here that there is a section of what is modern-day Arizona that is still green and owned by Mexico. That is the area that we would get in the Gadsden Purchase. So, while white settlers and Native Americans fought together to free Texas, the sort of harmonious relationship didn't last. The white Texans, known as Anglos, distrusted the Tejanos. They feared that they had Mexican sympathies, even though they had fought against Mexico during the war. Also, Tejanos were mainly Catholic, while most of the American settlers coming in were Protestant, and this religious division also created rifts in this new Texas territory that we're talking about. One great example of this is the Colonel Juan Seguin, who was alive from 1806 to 1890 from San Antonio, where he was a colonel in the Texas Army. He was a judge and eventually became the mayor of San Antonio. He would have been probably killed at the Alamo, except for the fact that Colonel Travis, William Travis, the leader of the Texans at the Alamo, ordered him away to find reinforcements. However, after he became mayor of San Antonio, a vigilante mob basically threatened him out of office, and he had to flee, and ironically, had to go live in Mexico. Now, at the beginning of the 1840s, one of the big things that happened was California. California had barely 15,000 non Native American citizens at the beginning of the 1840s. Most people were actually heading to Oregon or to Texas. This changed in 1848 when a Swiss immigrant named Johann Sutter discovered gold in California. And very soon, word got out of gold in California, and newspapers basically were saying it's gold everywhere. You know, gold is just all over the ground. You can come over and pick it up and get rich immediately. And so prospectors flooded into California. This gold rush brought in mainly young men, but not just from America, from around the world. It expanded the size of Californian cities. It exploded the population. It also had a massive impact on California's ecosystem right up through today. It created giant boom towns that disappeared overnight once the gold mines dried up, called ghost towns today. So here is what Gold Rush California looked like, and can see the routes to the gold fields. You can see where the biggest mother lodes were, and it became a travel spot all of a sudden. So while the gold rush brought in miners from China and Mexico, South America, Australia, Europe, and the United States, there were also restrictions on foreigners that were set up pretty quickly. Vigilante groups, first of all, didn't even, they set up illegal restrictions, basically chasing off people who were from foreign countries. The California legislature also imposed a $20 per month tax on foreigners, effectively forcing them out because they couldn't afford to pay that tax. Some groups, including many Chinese workers, did find jobs on the railway. Some worked in stores in places like San Francisco. However, most Americans of color, especially African Americans and Native Americans, found themselves not welcome in this new California territory after the gold rush. So here are some Chinese workers and white workers working on the railway during the gold rush era in California. Now, the opening of California also opened trade with Asia. Part of the new territory had ports, the ports of San Francisco, Port of Los Angeles, places like that, and they used these to go and trade with Asia. Between 1848 and 1860, we started to trade with China. In the 1850s, we also started to trade with Japan. Japan had been very closed off for centuries. And so we see that between 1853 and 1854, Commodore Matthew Perry traveled to Tokyo to negotiate a trade treaty, and this treaty opened up Japanese ports to American trade and also established a time period of Japanese modernization where they started to modernize their army, their navy, the way they lived in that area. So here's Matthew. Whoa, I forgot the picture there. It is Matthew Perry, although not the Matthew Perry that we know, recently dearly departed from Friends. It is Commodore Matthew Perry. He's the younger brother of Oliver Hazard Perry, who was a hero of the War of 1812. And here is a Japanese piece of art called The Transportation of Cargo by Westerners at the Port of Yokohama, painted in 1861 by Utagawa Sadahide, which shows an American ship landing in Japan.